Hello everyone, I'm Kirthika, Faculty of History here at Understand UPSC. So I'm here to give you a small glimpse about the entire history of prelims and mains. So generally when you see this subject, people fear history. Why? Because they believe it to be tough, they consider it to be boring, they consider it to be lengthy, and the normal fear what students face is, ma'am, it's too much to remember. But maybe I can partially say yes, but partially it would be a no. Why? Because this subject is one of the interesting subject. If you learn our past, our future would be much better. This is a very common statement which is generally revolving around the historians. So I'm here to give you some brief about certain topics related to our exam for both prelims and mains perspective. So today I'm going to pick a topic from ancient India. So if you look at ancient India, our syllabus starts from the first chapter, the Indus Valley Civilization, and the syllabus ends with the death of Harshavardhana. So generally we call it as the death of Harsha, which would be according to the topic, my topic, it will be 7th topic. Getting chapter 1 would be IVC, chapter 2 would be the Vedic age, chapter 3 Mahajanapata, chapter 4 Mauryas, chapter 5 post-Mauryas, chapter 6 Guptas, and chapter 7 Harsha. So this predominantly is the chapter of the North Indian division. South India, when you touch, we start with megaliths, we start with the Sangam age, we continue with Pallavas and the Chalukyas. So now, Indus Valley to the death of Harsha, the bracket of Indus Valley is 2500 BC to 1900 BC, the overall bracket of IVC, and Harsha died in 647 AD. So Harsha ruled from 606 to 647 AD. So this is the timeline of Harsha and this is the timeline of IVC. When you take overall the bracket of ancient India, it would be 2500 BC to 647 AD is the overall bracket of ancient India. So today I would like to start a topic, a very interesting topic, and generally a very important topic where you get lots and lots of questions from the UPSC. So the topic which I'm going to discuss today would be the Indus Valley Civilization. So if you look at the bracket of Indus Valley Civilization, 2500 BC to 1900 BC would be the bracket of the civilization. See, generally when you look at this topic is also called as, there's another name for this topic, we call it as the Harappan Civilization. So it is Indus Valley Civilization or the Harappan Civilization. So what are we going to discuss here, or what are the important aspects we touch in this topic? If you look at the Indus Valley Civilization, it was Alexander Cunningham in 1861 who reached Punjab and found out that this Punjab had got something very important, very significant, and the Chalcolithic age, did not end with the Vedic age. So with his findings, he wrote to the British Parliament seeking permission for an excavation because he found a pottery piece. So in 1861, the Parliament granted permission to establish the ASI, which is the Archaeological Survey of India, headquartered at Calcutta, and Alexander Cunningham became its first Director General. From 1861, so if you look at 1861, the Viceroy was Lord Canning. So modern India goes with Lord Canning. We had the Indian Councils Act, we have the High Courts Act, and so and so. But it is the same time, it was a white man's burden, and the ASI was formed, where many pilot projects were taken by the ASI. And after the efforts of Alexander Cunningham, it was in 1920 with the efforts of John Marshall. So John Marshall, we were able to get a complete picture, and when he wrote to the British Parliament, The parliament gave him permission for excavation, and in 1921, with John Marshall, with Dayaram Shani, getting it, the John Marshall and Dayaram Shani excavated the first site at Punjab, and that site was named as Harappa. Since Harappa was the first site, so Harappa on the banks of river Ravi. So since Harappa was the first site to be excavated, the entire excavation was called as Harappan excavation. So gradually, the historians found a big civilization. We've unearthed a civilization, and when they found a civilization, they named it as number 1, the Harappan Civilization, and number 2, the Indus Valley Civilization. So why Indus Valley? Because all the sites what they've excavated, approximately 2,800 sites, they were all either on the valleys of river Indus, its tributaries and distributaries. So the other name was Indus Valley Civilization. So recently, historians have also given a term called Indo-Saraswati Valley Civilization because majority of the sites were found on the valleys of river Saraswati as well. So now, after excavating Indus Valley and after finding out that it was a huge civilization, we have 10 basic features which fall under the category of Indus Valley Civilization. But before going on to it, we'll see the northernmost extent of IVC was Manda, which is at Kashmir. The southernmost extent, so I'll take the northernmost extent, the southernmost extent, the westernmost extent, the easternmost extent, the northwestern extent. So when you look at the northernmost extent, it was at Manda in Kashmir. Southernmost extent was at Daimabad in Maharashtra. Westernmost extent was Desalpur in Gujarat. And easternmost extent was Alamgirpur in UP. And northwestern extent was Shortugoi in Afghanistan. Since Pakistan was also a part of the Indus Valley Civilization, we take the westernmost overall extent. When you put the Indian subcontinent into the picture, the westernmost will be Sukta-Jendor. Indian site west will be Desalpur. So where are they located? Manda in Kashmir, Daimabad in Maharashtra, Desalpur in Gujarat, Alamgirpur in UP, Shortugoi in Afghanistan, and Sukta-Jendor at Pakistan. So these are the regions what we see, the extent of IVC. So once the Indus Valley extent was found, so if you look at the Indian subcontinent, once you see the extent, the Indus Valley civilization was thriving here. So wherever Indus was moving, we've excavated a huge site, and we call this as the peak period of IVC, that is the flourishing period of IVC, 2500 BC to 1900 BC. So we've already written because we are doing Indus Valley. So this is the mature phase, or we call it as the flourishing phase. So when I do the classes, South India will be dealt separately because I don't mingle North and South Indian history together, because history should be compartmentalized and studied. So this is about the extent. Now moving on to the next part, we are touching upon the features of IVC. So what are the features of IVC? The first feature, we call it as town planning. So there was a perfect town planning in IVC. And when you look at the town planning, what exactly fell under the concept of town planning? See, 2,800 sites were excavated and all the towns were well planned. There was an upper town and a lower town. The upper town was always identified with a citadel, and the lower town is where the common public lived. So in town planning, we talk about the towns. And the second one, we talk about the streets. All streets in the lower town were cutting each other at 90 degrees. So Harappans had a right angle was practiced. So they had, the streets were having a grid pattern. So how could this uniformity be? So such a uniformity symbolizes that a strong centralized authority existed. And in all the streets, you had houses. There were big houses, there were small houses. So two houses faced each other. And between two houses, the nearby houses, there were small lanes. We call it as gullies. So these lanes were there. The houses were broad, houses were wide, some were small, some were single storied, double storied. So, entrance of the house was there. They maintained privacy. There was an open courtyard. Houses had plenty of rooms. Stairs were on the sides. Getting it? And it was kind of built with burnt bricks. The excellent one about the Harappan burnt brick was it measured 4:2:1. So they had perfect houses with multiple room, and the next one was the bathrooms. Harappans were the first to construct bathrooms, and these bathrooms were also constructed with burnt bricks, wider, larger. Getting it? Wooden doors might have been used. There was a big water tank, a kind of an Indian closet system was used. And the most impressive feature of the Harappan town planning was their drainage system. They had a perfect, excellent drainage system, which is still considered to be one of the impressive feature of IVC town planning. Then they had wells. Plenty of wells have been found. Circular wells have been found. Both public wells and private wells have been found. Then we have the greatest one, the citadel. Citadel plays a very important role in Harappan town planning because citadel was found in the upper town. When you look at the upper town and the lower town. So the lower town, the common people lived, so where the ruled was living. Upper town is where the ruler might have existed. So every town is attributed to a citadel, and we have plenty of citadels being excavated. Say, for example, Mohenjo-daro has got the biggest citadel. So we call Mohenjo-daro citadel as the Great Citadel. And at Chanhudaro, there's no citadel. Recently, we've got evidence of a fortified wall at Dolavira and Rakigari from a citadel. So we have these examples that they were like completely knowing the fortified walls and fortifications were known to them. Citadel clearly gives us an idea that the concept of a ruled and a ruler existed. There was a clear demarcation. Then comes the famous Great Bath, which was located at Mohenjo-daro, a single structure where historians conclude that it might have been a place for ritual bathing. Then comes the granaries. The biggest granary again was found at Mohenjo-daro, and we call that to be the Great Granary. So almost all the sites at granaries where grains were stored. When grains were stored, we clearly understand that Harappans knew the art of agriculture. Warehouses were also found. And these granaries clearly gives us the understanding that Harappans were well planners, they were futuristic in character. So all these, when you conclude the town planning, how do we conclude? They were highly organized. Harappans were highly organized. Harappans were systematic in nature. This is the first feature we talk about town planning. The second feature we talk about the Harappan polity. See, when you look at Harappan polity, how was the political system? We do not know. Who was the ruler? We do not know. How did they communicate? Because it's proto-history, the script of IVC is not yet deciphered. So they had a very strong and a sound language, but we are unable to understand what language did they speak. So the political setup is still unknown, but historians give us some idea that there might have been an oligarchical form. There might have been a monarchical form. Priestly class might have dominated, or merchants might have dominated. Whatever it is, we conclude the polity as the Harappans were highly centralized, because such a uniformity would not be possible without a strong centralized ruler. And for this centralization, we take the citadel as one common example. The third feature is the Harappan economy. Almost in all the sites, we find that, we find grains. So, and the granary signifies that they practiced agriculture. So, agriculture, cattle rearing, animal husbandry, domestication of animals was practiced. So they knew canal irrigation because we have evidence at Shortugoi. There was a reservoir found at Dolavira. So Dolavira being a UNESCO site, the water reservoir clearly makes us understand that Harappans practiced a kind of irrigation. So both Rabi and Kharif crops were known to them, and we find plenty of cropping patterns seen there. At Kalibangan, a ploughed field have been excavated, and there are many terracotta replicas of plough, which clearly indicates that Harappans knew the art of ploughing. And the second aspect in economy was trade. The contemporary civilization of IVC was the Mesopotamian civilization. And when you look at the Mesopotamian civilization, their literary record called Avesta clearly mentions that they traded with the land of 5 rivers called Meluha. And this Meluha was nothing but they referred it to Punjab, or we call it as India. So Harappans and Mesopotamians had a very good trade. So how do we conclude the economy? We conclude it like Harappans were self-sufficient and they were self-sufficient and had a flourishing trade. So this is what we concluded with Harappan economy, the third feature. See, for concluding all these, we do not have a literary record, but with archaeological evidences, we are trying to conclude. Now going on to Harappan society. How was the Harappan society? See, on looking at the social pattern, multicultural system might have existed. The society might have divided into multiple classes. Maybe there was a potter, a baker, a seal maker, a goldsmith. There was a peasant. There might have been an artisan, a craftsman, a carpenter, because we find the evidence of wood. So multi communities might have lived together, and with the size of houses, what we find, we understand that they might have had some sort of economic division. And when you look at the society again, there are two views taken here. R.S. Sharma says the society was patriarchal. Romila Thapar says the society was matriarchal. So what are these terms? When you look at Indus Valley Civilization, maximum elements resemble that the female count was more, and tentatively we are taking a conclusion that Harappans might have been matriarchal. Occupation was open to all, education might have existed there, but we do not know how did they study, because on looking at their travel on towards the Persian Gulf, so they knew geography, grid pattern, 90-degree, they knew arithmetics, they knew mathematics, which clearly gives us an idea that there was some sort of education system which was prevalent. But how did they learn? Who were the teachers? So we are not aware of it. So how do we conclude the society? We conclude the society as Harappans were egalitarian in character. So the fourth feature, society, they were egalitarian. The fifth feature what we take is the Harappan religion. So how was the Harappan religion? See, when you consider about religion, we consider about, so they worship nature. So nature worship was prevalent throughout IVC. They worshipped animals. And we believe that humped bull was considered to be sacred. And at Harappa, we've excavated a Pashupati Mahadev seal, which clearly is identified with Lord Shiva. And we call him as Proto-Shiva. And in all the sites, we have evidences of Mother Goddess. And plus at Harappa, we've excavated a stone linga. Naga cult existed. They worshipped pigeon. They have tree worship. They have bird worship. So collectively, when you put in all the sites, amulets have been found. Fire altars have been found at Kalibangan. On seeing the element of religious practices inch by inch, and when you count it, we conclude that Harappans were secular. So secularism started coming up from Indus Valley. Then we move on to the potteries. In all the sites, potteries have been found, and the maximum, ware used was the red ware. They use black ware, they use red and black ware, ochre color pottery, pinkish ware, grey ware, painted grey ware. So this PGW, so-called painted grey ware, came much later. So potteries, they used pots, they made mugs, they made vases, they made jars, they made lids, they made bowls, they made urns. So all sorts of pottery parts were known to them. And potteries generally in history signifies survival. And when Alexander Cunningham hit a pottery piece at Punjab, that was a clear-cut point which made him to write to the parliament seeking permission for excavation. So potteries were very much advanced there. So the art of storage was known to them. And the seventh one, we go with seals. So what were seals? Seals were an object, it's a kind of an object made with steatite, soapstone. All the sites we have yielded seals. The maximum number of seals were in a square shape, and it was made from an object called steatite, soapstone. And when you look at these seals had pictographic and geometric representation. So we have a seal of Pashupati Mahadev, a humped bull seal, a unicorn seal. We have a seal of a sun seal where a swastik image is made. So these seals are predominantly very common, and we believe that the seals might have been a mode of exchange, or it might have been for sealings. The purpose is unknown, but it might have come from a centralized authority. The eighth feature we talk is about the Harappan script. 400 plus signs have been excavated so far. So throughout IVC, we've excavated 400 plus signs, and the script is not yet deciphered. The biggest challenge what we face today is we are unable to decipher the Harappan script. Since we are unable to decipher the Harappan script, we are not knowing exactly what they were up to. Archaeology helps us to understand what they were, but we are trying to make our level best to find out. So the script is still not yet deciphered, but when you conclude, what do we understand? Harappans were literates. Harappans were literate. Some sort of literacy was there in IVC. Then coming on to the next one, science and technology. So in the science and technology, what do we understand? See, Harappans knew gold, silver, copper, tin, nickel. They know metallurgy. It's because, example, they mixed copper and tin. So they obtained bronze. So it was a Bronze Age civilization. And the famous statue what they made was the dancing girl at Mohenjo-daro, which was a bronze statue. There was a stone statue made by them, which was excavated at Mohenjo-daro, called the famous bearded man, or we call him as the priest king. At Harappa, a male nude torso was excavated of red jasper. So plenty of toys, plenty of other objects like toys for children like rattles, carts, all these signifies that they were very much into entertainment. So we've excavated board games, we've excavated a dice, all these we put it under science and tech. So they were advanced for their age. The last one what we discuss is about disposal of the dead. How did the Harappans dispose their dead? When you look at the disposal of the dead, Harappans practiced burials. Plenty of burials have been excavated throughout IVC zone. Say for example, at Lothal, we found a twin burial. So burial was predominantly common. A woman buried with her ornaments have been found at Rakigari. And when you look at the orientation of the dead, they practice two orientation. One is north to south. Head was placed in the northern side, feet in the southern side. Number two, east to west orientation. Head was in the eastern side and feet was in the west. And this east to west orientation was very limited, found only at Rakigari and Kalibangan. All the predominant burials are found everywhere. They practiced extended burial, a very common one. Number two, coffin burials were found at Harappa and Lothal. It's called RH cemetery. And we have urn burial. Urn burials were given only for children. So when we see urn burials throughout the IVC zone, we believe that and we infer that infant mortality rate was high. Since they lacked medical facility, paleontologists today confirm that Harappans were not aware of post-delivery mechanism. So disposal of the dead. So these are the 10 features what we understand with IVC. So these topics would all be dealt in detail according to prelims and mains. I have just given you a nutshell about the Indus Valley Civilization and its features.